I think it's stuff that it's topics that probably a lot of people I know have dealt with in their life or are dealing with in their life when it just comes to like kind of where am I at in my life or what's my relationship like. Those heavier questions really, had this really cool intersection with cycling. And I think that is kind of a universal story, no matter where you're coming from. There's something about cycling to me that really allowed me to process some heavy things in my life. And I see that and I hear that from other people that do my events too. I say the Tour Divide was life changing for me, and I don't say that lightly, so there was something about that process of spinning the wheels that many times and being that raw emotionally and physically that really was needed for me at that time.
From KOM Cycling and Michigan Midpack Media, welcome to the Dirty Chain Podcast, the podcast that covers the cycling scene from the viewpoint of the Michigan Midpack. I am your host, Trevor.
And this is Tristan.
And on this episode, I have a great conversation with race director of the Heck of the North gravel race out of Duluth, Minnesota, Jeremy Kershaw. I talk with Jeremy all about his race, the Heck of the North, but more so we kind of get into the weeds a bit about the state of gravel and the importance of the importance of mental health. The importance of mental health, the importance of...
How do you say the importance of taking care of your mental health?
I think that's good. The importance of taking care of your mental health. That's exactly what we talk about. So yeah, really cool conversation with Jeremy. But before we get to that conversation, Tristan, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me back. Glad to ride with you today.
Yes, we just finished up a cold, snowy fat bike ride. And you're becoming quite the regular here at the Dirty Chain Podcast.
I know. Now that you moved over to East Lansing, right down the road from me, makes it pretty easy.
Makes it too easy, yes. Yeah, so you had mentioned we just finished up a fat bike ride, and this is kind of why I wanted you to join me today, because I mentioned last episode that I had just gotten a fat bike and I'm kind of working toward polar roll, but right around the same time I got a fat bike,
I myself got a fat bike. I'd been looking for months and months and months, and Global Fat Bike Day came around and still without fat bike. So I posted that to my Strava title and had a good friend reach out and say, hey, I can solve your problem for you.
So you rode Global Fat Bike Day on your
skinny tires of 2.35 Bojack and drop bar.
It seems skinny at this time of the year, but
yeah,
usually you have the fattest tires on the gravel ride.
I actually said that on the ride. I said I'm not used to being undersized in terms of tires, so yeah, that was a very happy Global Fat Bike post day, I guess. Sunday, sure. Getting connected with a friend and getting that fat bike.
So we've been riding a few times with, just like I think I said this last episode, but man, I can't get over how much fun it is. Like, how are you enjoying your fat bike?
I feel silly not having one before.
No kidding, man.
And even listening to episodes, like a year and a half, 2 years ago, where you and Sheldon were talking about getting fat bikes. I can't believe we just didn't get them. Like, they're amazing. It's so much fun.
I feel like basically everyone that listens is like, of course, like why are you like what did you expect? They're the best. And I I feel like such a newbie out there, because there's like things like even today, we're riding with Chad Nicole and Scott, and he's like, hey, look, he's got jumbo gyms on. He's sliding all over the place. I'm like, I don't know what that means. I don't.
Yeah.
There's so many. There's you can. It's just a whole world that I haven't even paid attention to before.
Well, even going, typically for us, it's talking tire size, but like I'm still riding some of the fattest tires out there, but they're not studded. So occasionally I'd scrape through that fresh snow today and get to the ice, and it just wasn't enough traction. And Scott's running, I don't know, 380 some studs or whatever per tire. And it's like, well, now not only do I have to talk width, I have to talk stud count per tire. So, yeah, a little above my pay grade there, I guess, but can't wait to get to it next year when I get some new tires.
I know you're not doing Polar Roll, and I'm sure we're going to have episodes dedicated directly to Polar Roll, because I'll be, I don't know if I'll be succeeding in riding it. Well,
Well, hopefully you'll be succeeding, but I'll let you jump in feet first and
let you know about it for next year.
I think that that seems like the most feasible first race in Marquette for me. I think Polar Roll seems like that is the best fit for me.
Meaning not like, so there's Polar Rolls in Marquette, Michigan. So there's Polar Roll, then there's Crusher, which is a really long gravel / mountain bike race. And then, of course, Margie Gessick, which is one of the hardest mountain bike races. I'm with you, man. I mean, I did Crusher. You could do Crusher. I think Crusher is in your wheelhouse more than Margie Gessick. But I can't speak on Margie Gessick.
Yeah, I think those are on the list to be done for me at some point. Crusher is very much scary still, and Margie is definitely at the furthest point, from me thinking about it even, but it's definitely on the list. I think Polar Roll seems the most appropriate to start with.
I mean, this is kind of why I wanted to talk to you, though, is speaking of what's on the list. It's January, it's a new year, and I know you have several things planned for 2022. Some of those will intersect with what I do. Some of them will not. You have some big plans. That the fat bike thing is fun. And before, I just want to quickly interrupt myself in all of this and say one of my big goals for 2022 was to have more fun on bikes, and the fat bike is such like the perfect tool for that. And I want to thank like you and Sebastian, our friend Sebastian, for just getting me out and doing borderline stupid rides. I mean, we do all this like urban single track stuff, and it just is a complete blast. And you don't need a fat bike for it, but you need friends that are willing to take you on stupid rides. So that was a big goal for me for 2022. We kind of started it at the tail end of 2021, but I want to keep doing that. But I also have big goals, ambitions for some other races, but I want to hear about some of your races. So I think let's start in state, or shall we start out of state? What do you want to do?
I think we start in state. What is it? Is it March or April? Barry, I don't even know when. I don't even know when it's coming.
It's March, actually. This year's March.
Yeah. March, we've got the Barry Psycho. So that's going to be a fun 100. A little different than the last rendition in October when it was full summer kit, nice and warm.
Maybe we bought our fat bikes at just the right time, because you never know what it's going to be like in March.
I still think the Bo Jackson will be the right choice of bike there. It just depends on, will I change the tire from what I ran Iceman at, or will I put my slicks back on? So I think I'm starting out with Barry. The only thing that I've actually signed up for besides Barry is Gravel Worlds out in Lincoln, Nebraska, doing the long haul. Super stoked for that. That's 300 miles of rolling Flint Hills and Nebraska gravel. So
Yeah, I know they say rolling, but the climbing from what I hear is pretty brutal.
yeah, it's I think they say rolling because it just continuously happens. Is what Nicole and Chad shared with me or with us.
Yeah.
I guess we're not in Michigan anymore where it's just flat. So
I mean, that's pretty incredible. Just even to sign up for it, but man, yeah, Gravel Worlds, it's a bucket list race for a lot of people. But then they opened up this 300 some mile one. How many miles?
I think it's 300. They haven't posted. They change the route every year, is my understanding, and they haven't posted the route yet. I believe they're pretty consistent with making sure you can get to gas stations fairly easily. Self-supported.
At this point, Sebastian is riding it with you.
Yeah, Sebastian and I are planning to ride it together. I believe Chad and Nicole will be out there, so hopefully we make it around the loop, I guess.
So you have done many ultra endurance rides, and this one will be above and beyond.
It'll be the longest ride by at least 90 miles.
Yeah. So I didn't think we would talk about this, but a couple times that you've been on the podcast, we've talked about the Sancho 200, and you've done that 3 times.
3 times, yeah.
Yeah, and it's probably happened 4 or 5 or something like that. I know that you were bummed this year because they basically
retired
the course.
They retired the Trevor City course, so I was pretty bummed about that. Although Jason did hint that it would be heading north, so I took that very literally, that the course would head out of Traverse City north, especially seeing some of his friends' rides heading out of Traverse City. I literally thought it would take off from the same place and go north, but now seeing their recent posts about the Sancho UP.
So I mean, it's kind of not so much breaking news, but it just happened a couple days ago. That Sancho posted that they're changing up the course and they're going to start in the UP, kind of the same starting area as the Moran 166, correct? Like,
yep, that's my understanding, is same starting area. Route. I think it's going to be treated as more of an adventure race, and
right, you have a window. It's kind of like the Crusher, like an EX.
Adventure.
Crusher. Yep.
Take the adventure as
so
you
did
please.
you? It's funny because you were saying that you didn't expect to have to, but I feel like you do. You have to do it.
I have to. I mean, I had not signed up for the Moran 166 yet, but that is on the list to do. So now I have to go to the UP twice. It's simple as that. Unless I can have a very busy weekend.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
So I should go twice.
You're saying do one of them one day.
Well, I would have to do the Moran 166 first, and then
the Sancho 366.
The Mirage. I don't know, but one of them you get a cupcake after completion, so that'd be the Sancho. I'm wondering if you ride the Sancho, get the cupcake, and then go into the Moran.
I think this sounds like a terrible idea.
I was thinking that it would be a 2-weekend adventure.
Yeah.
But as we discuss it, I don't know what's going to occur. I'm also thinking I need somebody to ride that far.
No, I do like the Sancho. Since it's a window, I think it makes it a little easier to figure out. And also, I don't know is it timed? Are there going to be timing chips, or is it just go do it?
I'm sure it's
I
probably
don't think all the information. I think I got to get Jason on and talk more with him about this, but
I think we should speculate a little bit further. That way we can pin him into a corner.
ooh, perfect.
Although I do know for a fact that Chet Bearclaw does not get painted into corners. So
I heard that first place gets a free Bearclaw bicycle.
I heard that first person to do it leading up to the Moran and piggybacking them together
On the same weekend?
same weekend, and whoever places the fastest between those two, they get the Tomac.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Which
I've heard that whoever comes up with that idea gets a free towback.
I would go for that. I would definitely go for that.
Yeah, of course. So we don't know all the details, but there
is a sand dune adjacent. There is a sand dune adjacent, and one detail that when you speak to Jason, I need to know where that sand dune is in terms of miles into their course.
Was that sand dune? I saw a picture of them riding down a sand dune.
Yeah,
It's
optional?
Is that on the route?
Well, it's optional, but it's the actual dune itself is not required or not part of the route. It just is adjacent to the route. So what I want to know is where that sand dune comes in. If it's late in the ride, probably not going to touch it. If it's early enough in the ride, would I do it to say that I did the sand dune?
I think.
And I know either way,
I think
I'm
if this actually
about it.
exists, it needs to be done.
I agree. It's just, how much are you going to hate yourself 170 miles
do you walk
later?
up the sand dune and then go down? Is it like
No. I think you ride down the sand dune and then you have to walk back.
Oh, that's even
up it.
worse. Gosh.
Yeah.
Well,
And it looks like you pick up some speed on the sand dune.
I
too.
will say it's probably a good place to crash and burn too.
It does go down to water, so I mean, it might be necessary to cool down depending on when you ride this thing.
I would be interested to do the Sancho with you. I think that would be fun to go find a Saturday and just go up there and do it.
Also, the official stats are that it's 33% harder than Sancho Traverse City. So that means it's going to be extremely fun.
Is it more sandy?
I don't know. It couldn't be more sandy.
Yeah.
There's no, unless that sand dune is, I don't know, but
Anyway,
I'm
there's-
excited.
Obviously,
I'm very
there's
excited.
there's some excitement, but there's also a lot we don't know about it. So
There's a lot of fear. It's, I guess if you were going to do a verbal meme, it would be Ralph Wiggum sitting on his school bus and
I'm
I'm
scared.
scared.
No, that's interesting though. Like it's like a late addition to this year's gravel calendar, and it just adds like something like I said, like with the fat bike, like I want to do more fun things, more adventure things, and this feels to me like more of an adventure, not something that
Has to be done or forced to be
Correct.
competitive with the series.
Yeah, and
or-
you're not like holding a wheel or trying to like kill yourself for 166. Like Moran is a whole different story.
That's a competitive race.
It's just all out for. I mean, some people treat it that way, some people don't. But this one like gets me a little bit excited. And so now, I mean, you have like Crusher is kind of like that, Crusher EX, and now the Sancho UP. So I don't know. There's some choices to make here. So this guy I talked to about Heck of the North, Jeremy Kershaw, he has like a series of 3 different gravel races. And there's one that's Heck of the North, and then one's like a bike packing trip, and then there's another one. But I think it really reminded me of like the 906 trio of races, kind of a little more bike packing gravel oriented than mountain biking necessarily. But I think it's cool to have in your set of, if you're going to have multiple races and like Jason and Bear Claw and all this, like I think it's cool to have an adventure race as well as a a competitive race, and just kind of mix up the feels of all of them, just like Jeremy has done at Heck of the North. Yeah, I mean, super interesting. I wanted to kind of talk about fat bikes and your season and all that, but this was all before we heard that that there was a new version of Sancho, and you're like the local Sancho expert, so it just seemed super fitting to talk more about that with you. But yeah, Tristan, I'm sure that we will talk much more on the podcast as the year rolls on. But thank you for joining me here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's always good to get on and chat, and also more importantly, fun to get out on a bike with you.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Now let's get to my conversation with Jeremy Kershaw from Heck of the North. If you don't mind, as we begin, do you mind just introducing yourself, giving us your name and what you do in the cycling space?
Yeah, my name is Jeremy Kershaw, and I am the creator and director of Heck of the North Productions, which is a gravel cycling event business here in Duluth, Minnesota. And over the last 14 years, we've created and built upon the cycling world that existed up here on the North Shore long before I got here. But we have brought 3 different events to life now, and kind of been part of that process of seeing gravel cycling and off pavement cycling grow up in this part of the world.
Yeah, so I've definitely heard of Heck of the North, and then we can get to this video that I saw you on YouTube a little bit later, but yeah, like I've heard of Heck of the North, and then when I saw you on this video, on this YouTube film, I thought, man, I got to talk to you because, one, you've been in the scene and in the community for a long time, and then also with your event, but then also you have a really cool story. So, but before we get into the story, I'd like to talk a little bit more about your event specifically. You said you have 3 events right now, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So the main ones, are they all called Heck of the North, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, the Heck of the North is our first event that we created in 2009. And our other 2 events, we have one in the spring called Le Grand du Nord, and that's based out of a small North Shore town of Grand Marais, closer to the Canadian border. And that format is very similar to the Heck of the North. And then we introduced a bike packing style race, I guess, about 5 years ago, and that's now called the Fox. And that's we've done several different versions of that. That was originally called the Heck Epic. I've gotten away from the word epic these days because everything is epic. But we've now also kind of made that into a slightly shorter event. But that's introducing the idea of carrying some stuff in the bike packing fashion with a time element to it. So, which I have a pretty big, I have space for in my life in the world of in the world of cycling. The Heck of the North started with about 40 people in 2009. And that was really based off of my experience with Chris Scogan's Alamanzo, which was arguably one of the first gravel cycling events in the country. Not the first, but it was close. And Chris did an absolutely elegant job of creating that event. And I drove home after my first one thinking I've got to do something like that up here in the northern part of the state. And I was really just blown away with the format. I hadn't competed for years. And so that next fall, that was in the spring. And then in the fall, I put together the bones of that first event. So we had about 40 riders do that first Heck of the North. And it's since grown and morphed, and every year is a little different. And now we're up to 700 people riding it, which is, back in 10 years ago, I'm never doing more than 100 riders. And we used to do postcards and the whole thing. I mean, I really based it off of at the time, the kind of the gravel ethos, which was donation only or quote unquote free, which that's another story. And then, it just kind of grew, and every year it's grown a little bit more. Our intent is never to have as many cyclists as possible. And I swear I'll look at it every year and say, does it still feel the way that I want it to feel? And I think we're still there. And I think, we're seeing a lot of new people come into the world of cycling, which is, I think, overall great. That's now become really where it's at for me, is introducing people to a challenge and to still keep that. Again, I'm all about the feel of the event and what we create. And I hope that's there still. And I'll do everything I can to keep that essence of what I want to be part of, if I were to do a ride or a race.
My guess is when you were inspired to start your own race, you had or event, maybe is a better way to say it. You probably had no idea about the trajectory of cycling in the United States. Are you just kind of blown away about kind of right time, right place, right time? Or, it seems like 2009, were we even calling it gravel racing back then? I'm not even sure.
It's a good question. And gravel cycling, it seemed pretty avant-garde at that time. And, what's old is new again. And, like the Heck of the North is based off of a name play on Paris-Roubaix, which is nicknamed the Hell of the North in northern France. And so I put a Minnesota spin on that. And
which is, it's brilliantly Midwestern, I have to say. It's so...
right. And and all those events and all of, the heyday of cycling in the US was arguably in the late 1800s and turn of the century in 1900s when, there was probably no paved roads, So again, we're back to this idea of riding off pavement. And I love talking to these people that grew up on farms in the Midwest, and they're like, you know what, I hate you because I spent the first 30 years of my life trying to get away from gravel roads. And now I'm back to banging around gravel roads. And I don't know, maybe I think I was emotionally taken by the event that the two events. The other one was called the Ragnarok, and that's still going on, and that is very very similar to the first one, and that's in the Driftless area, or kind of the Cooley area of southern Minnesota. And I'm not alone in the idea that these were really different than other competitions or other events or other cycling events that I grew up with. You were a Cat 4 racer, a Cat 1 racer, or it was all road biking, where I grew up. And then mountain biking came along, and that obviously was a thing and still is. But if I felt that, I'm sure there's hundreds, if thousands of people that have felt that same feeling from gravel cycling. It's something different. And it still is that way to me now when I scout routes and when I do other events. I love it, and I think it hit a nerve in a lot of people. It was this mix of hard but doable, and I don't, the community is a word that I'm really careful to use. But there is kind of this community of people that are really nice to hang out with. And I still feel that the people that I meet at our events are really good people overall. It sounds cheesy, but it's like, they're just fun to hang out with, and that's the recipe for a pretty successful trend in cycling. I think it was welcoming. I still say you ride with whatever you got, as long as it's, functional and that it's somewhat comfortable. And, so we see all different types of rigs still. And then you got a group of people that are generally welcoming to others. And that's still a cornerstone to our events. And yeah, boy, looking now, you know, we've turned our thing into a business for several reasons we did, and I won't look back on that. But to see other bigger events, which is another question really in my eyes of like, wow, where is gravel cycling's going? I looked at some of the people you interview, you've interviewed some really pretty famous, so to speak, people in the world of, of gravel cycling, of mountain biking in the US, if not the world. And it's interesting, I think, to see those people now competing in gravel events like the Unbound and the Mid South and Rebecca Ruches and all those,
Right.
the Belgian waffle ride. And so now when I look at our events, we're like, well, where do we fit into the grand scheme of things? And, I'm comfortable with where we're at. And with this question of right time, I look at the business model, so to speak, or the model that is gravel cycling for us. And it's like, boy, this is kind of an amazing thing that we have. And I hope to keep it that way for as long as I can.
Yeah, that is interesting about one thing you said is like each year you kind of look and see, well, how many people can we where's our cap and how many people are we going to bring into each of these events? And as you see it grow and grow, I'm sure there are some pros and there's some cons to that. And as you're talking about feel, and as long as it feels like you intended it to, then I don't think more people are as a negative thing. But it is interesting because here in Michigan, we have everything from very large gravel races. Barry-Roubaix is one of the earliest ones, and it's huge, and a lot of big names come to it. But then we have a ton of really grassroots gravel races, and I love each of them, each side of that spectrum, like as much as the other. And but it's different, it's totally different. The first gravel race I went to was a grassroots smalls called Waterloo Grit and Gravel, and it was meant to be a stepping stone because I was working toward Barry-Roubaix, but it was that first gravel race, not Barry-Roubaix, but that first one that really hooked me and was like, man, I didn't come home and say I want to start my own race, but
you're far healthier than I am. Yeah.
There was already a pretty vibrant gravel racing scene in my area, but I did leave that first gravel race and say I want to do more of this and hang out with more of these people. But do you find it? I mean, you said you're comfortable with where you are, with where Heck of the North sits in this spectrum. So is that difficult as you see? I don't know. I could see it. We are in a like even 2 years ago, I don't think we could have imagined how huge gravel was going to be right now. So like, is part of you hesitant? I don't want to really expand too much. I want to stay local and grassroots. Or is part of you like, why not? Let's let everyone experience what I want them to experience.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a good question. It's one that I've thought about a lot in the last, again, year and a half, and on a couple different levels, maybe 3 levels. First level was many years I didn't want to do anything other than 100-mile races for the event because I wanted it to be pure in the sense of like, hey, this is a 100-mile event. That's just the way it is, and when you're ready to join us, that's great. You can join us, but I'm not making this easier. But then we were like, someone was like, you should introduce a 50-mile event. So we introduced a 50-mile event, and then we introduced a 20-mile event. And I think that's where I'm going to stop. I'm not going to go into the half-mile events and all that. But what was really cool, I backed off of me being snobby about it and realized that we were getting people riding that just weren't doing the 100-mile events. And then it's kind of a gateway drug too. The 20-milers were like, hey, I did that. I wonder what you could do more. And like, next year I'm going to do the 50, or I'm going to do a 50 event and another event. And then you get people going all the way up to the 100-mile event. So to see that progression and to see people get back into cycling, that really maybe, and where it's really cool is we're seeing really young riders, and we're seeing, older than 60 riders start to flow into the event. And I'm like, this is great. Overall, it's a really good thing for cycling and for health and just everything, all the positives that come with cycling. So with that, number two maybe was the idea of growth. And we were like, well, as long as, again, our event isn't a total mess during the day, because it really is a lean operation. It's my wife and myself, and then a crew of really good volunteers. And we're lean. I mean, we don't have barriers set up. We don't have, we try to make it look good, but this is not, this isn't a Tour de France stage, and so the idea of like, if we can continue to grow and introduce new people to cycling, or bring people back to the idea of kind of that communal cycling experience, and have people drive home and think, wow, that was a really cool day, then great. We'll keep going as much as I can, this day, the day of like, I'm not going over 100 participants is long gone. I look at other events, again, like the bigger ones that are out there. I'm like, man, I do not want to get into the world of 3,000 riders. Just, I don't think there's physical limitations to where we ride, from whether it's parking or whatever, just person power. We are so fortunate to have the volunteers we have, that we couldn't do the events without those volunteers. So that's amazing. And every year, particularly my wife helps put that together, and it's great. So there's like, we'll keep organically growing a little bit, but I have no goal of being the biggest event in the country, without, no way, like absolutely not. And so now, this gets a little trickier. The third thing is this idea of growth in gravel cycling. And I've been quiet. I used to write quite a bit through the blogs, or my blog, or through the website. And like, I don't think the world needs more infighting among a good sport like cycling. That being said, I think debate is not a bad thing. And I think critique of what is happening is not a bad thing. And what I'm alluding to is the idea of, events that start really focusing on professionals coming in and riding, or kind of the idea of like, well, gravel cycling is now drawing in pro level athletes, or like sub pro level athletes, or they're being sponsored by, all the big names out there. And I realize that the Heck of the North Productions sits in this, again, kind of the spot where I'm like, well, we're growing, we're bringing new riders in, which is great, but we're not, we have awesome sponsors, but none of them are dictating that they have, the name of a mattress company and then the name of the gravel event, that we're not going there at all. It's Heck of the North plus our partners that help out, And so I like that size that we're at right now, where it's a little bit of growth, but not too big. And we're not being dictated, if we get fast people riding, that's great. I really, really like watching that end of the race. But to be honest, I've always enjoyed the stories from the mid pack and the people that are finishing last. The running joke in the endurance events I do of like, if you're going to be slow, you got to be tough, And so those people finishing at dark 30, those are the stories that are like, holy mackerel, I can't believe you did this. You were out twice as long as the people that finished, 5 hours ago. And so anyway, my preference is always toward not the flash of bringing in pro cyclists. It's those people that are going hard and that maybe are just trying to make it the fastest they've ever had, or just finishing their first 100-mile event, or finishing their first 26-mile event. Now, I say that, I don't mean to, this is not a criticism of the other events. It's more of where do we fit into this world now of like gravel cycling in the States, which has really grown. You're right. It's like, it's kind of the heydays when bakeries or, it's like you go to your local bakery to get a loaf of bread, or it used to be dairies, Now it's like most states have small events that you can go to that are very grassroots, and then if you wanted to, you could go to the supermarket kind of and go to these bigger events where you're
Sure.
like, wow, you're rubbing elbows with some really talented athletes,
Yeah, I
and
think
it's just a different feel.
I don't know if one is worse than the other. I mean, I don't think
No,
you're saying we don't need
no,
the
no.
supermarket race. I think there is a danger though when all of these supermarket races are starting to pop up, and then almost every weekend of the summer you have all of these huge races. And I don't know, do you worry about it drawing people away from your race and just survival and the competition of all these bigger races?
Well, it's funny. I'm not gonna. You're right. I'm not gonna label any of the bigger races. They are what they are, and I've raced them myself. I raced the Dirty Kansas back in its 10th version, back when it was called the Dirty Kansas, and it was a great experience. I mean, it was a beautiful course. I've yet to get down to Bobby's to do the Mid South, and that looks also incredible in its own sort of way. And so they are what they are. I think I'm amazed at how big and how quickly they grew. And to be honest, when I looked at our model I'm like, well, God, what are we doing wrong? It's like we've been in it now for 14 years, and we're like still just modest growth. We're not like crashing servers when we go live. And so I didn't have a chip on my shoulder. It's just like, well, it's different, we're
Sure.
And now I'm like, that's fine. That's totally fine with where we're at. And I still hear more positives about our events than negatives, by a long shot. I'll get the occasional like gripe, but and that's okay. And I think, these smaller events, you can give it a go. There's still quite a bit of work to put on. At least they are up here in the northern part of the state, where I have to permit quite a bit. And then there's insurance and all this. And that's one reason we made it into an actual business, to kind of keep it going. I know that I've seen the demise of some events, that it's like, this gets back to this thing about free gravel back in the day. It's like, yeah, it's free except for the gas that you spent there, all the gear that you spent there, that you donated hopefully to the event organizer. And meanwhile, the event organizer, like myself, is like paying insurance and permits, and none of it was free, but it was covered by donation. And I think the sustainability of gravel events, at least my own, I'll speak to my own, really dictated that I made it a little bit more formal. I mean, I'm spending hours of almost every day of the year, well, in various forms, various amounts of time working on the events. And to keep that going when I'm a professional in another sense, and I have a family, it's like, you need to change your headspace to make these into a real thing, and we started charging money, and I got some pushback on that.
That's what I was just going to ask. Was that difficult? I mean, it may have been a difficult decision, but yeah, did you receive some criticism for that?
I got some criticism, and some of it was pretty passive aggressive, and it wasn't bad, but I definitely got this like, well, it used to be this, and now it's now you're charging, and it definitely hit a button with me. I'm like, well, wait a minute, you guys, it's like, like I said, back to the free thing, is that it was free up to a point, but I literally have seen events go down because like it takes a lot of time, and all of a sudden I'm like, hey, if we want this event to keep going, I need personally to make it something that's going to last in that sense. And that's why I needed to make some really fundamental changes. And the idea that it's like, you're going to, it's just things change, and your favorite song changes after you listen to it for 50 times, it just, it's going to change, and hopefully not necessarily for the worse. And I think people can afford, a fairly modest entry fee, and I think people that know my events in particular know that I'm not in it for the money, but it's to keep it sustainable, So gravel is changing that way. And so back to this idea of like, wow, there's some really big events drawing professionals. I'm like, well, some people are really into that, and that's fine. at the same time, I think there's probably a ton of small events. And if they can keep going, that's great. Somewhere in the middle, I kind of call ourselves a middle event where we've seen, I'm glad we've been part of that early phase of it, not the earliest, but pretty early until now, where we're really pretty comfortable in what we're bringing to people and as far as an event structure goes. So let's just say I'm just watching it, and
Sure.
I hope it doesn't backfire in the world of gravel cycling in general, where all of a sudden the emphasis is totally on the fastest or whoever can pull in the most elite riders, give the most TV coverage. That's, to me, that's definitely moving away a little bit from the gravel ethos that I started, or that I was part of back in the day. I certainly didn't start it, but that I was like, wow, that's a really great part of gravel cycling. I've certainly been part of that change of where it's different, and I've done that myself, but to go to put all the emphasis on the fastest or who's pro, I think could be a mistake in the long run. Or I think I don't know, and maybe not a mistake, but I think it's going to change those events, and maybe they'll just become what they are. And the smaller events will still be small gravel events,
And I hope so. And I hope if there's a correction, if it corrects itself, that, like you said, it doesn't just totally take out gravel as a whole, and we can still be sustained by, all the different. So I'm like you. I like every single, like I said, like every side of the spectrum. I love the middle area where some of these, like, they're large but not too big, and then super small grassroots to I am doing Mid-South this year for the first time. I'm super excited about that. But yeah, I agree with you. I do worry too about how it's things are starting to seem like flashy, like who has the flashiest and biggest race. And, sometimes I think, and it's not always this way, but when you're talking about growth and you went from 100 miles down to 20 miles, but for some reason, a trend I've been seeing is everyone's tacking on more miles and more miles and more. I'm like, how many miles can we get? Or, 200 now is just like, oh, it's just a 200-mile race. And now we have 350-mile races. Like, come on. Like, if it's a bike packing race, like, that's a whole different animal. But, a 350-mile, I have friends that, are going to do the Gravel Worlds, whatever, and then you have the now Unbound XL, and that's just something else. But anyways, I'd say it more jokingly. It's like, how long can we get here? But
well, it's funny, and personally, I knew that I talk about this a little bit in the film that David produced. Was that cycling is, and a lot of endurance stuff is kind of a drug for me, I'm like, well, we did that much, I wonder if we can do more,
sure.
And
that's endurance, like endurance people. I love 100 miles. I love, I've done huge 250-mile events and things. It's like, okay, I did this. What else can I do? Yeah.
And I think I know personally that there's limits to that. And I've done, some Trans Iowas and the Dirty Kansas, and you're right, and Tour Divide, and you're like, where's the stopping point, and oddly, this year, our bikepacking event, we've actually made shorter. We've gone down to just 60-mile days with the idea that, okay, everyone's going big. We're going to zag in this way. Let's focus on a little shorter event and see, it's going to be small, only like 75 riders, and, they're not record days, but sorry, my daughter's practicing violin.
No problem.
And we'll see what that looks like. I think there's plenty of room for people that just want to start small now and be like, what does it feel like to ride 25 miles or like 60 miles with some gear last year bike, instead of going epically long to 400 miles, 500, we're going to go and be okay with that shorter distance for, a proportion of our events. So yeah, it's, I think it will self-correct. It's certainly looking in the world of gear and bikes. It's amazing. It's amazing what's now available compared to 10 years ago. And I think that's all like really pretty fascinating. Thankfully, I'm not entrenched in the cycling world in the business. I've never run a shop. I've always been a consumer that way. So for me, it's more of a curiosity, and it's just interesting to watch, particularly when I see new bikes roll up to the events. I'm like, oh my God, these bikes are amazing, and all the minutia of gear that you can have now tricked out for gravel bikes it's always pretty cool. But yeah, I'll be curious to see where it tops out. And I'll tell you my prediction: if they start bringing in, I think there was some Corey who was one of the founders of the Gravel Worlds, goes by Cornbread. He's done many Trans Iowas, and he was in my home state of Nebraska, and I've yet to get down to do the Worlds, which I've got to do sometime. But I think the UCI, the International Cycling Body, is now going to do a Gravel World Cup. And so everyone was waiting for this copyright battle to go on between the Pirate League cycling group, and the biggest organization in cycling in the world. And I think they backed off, and I don't think there's a problem. But it was like, oh my gosh, we're at that point now where people are taking a tongue-in-cheek Gravel Worlds thing, which is what it was, in Nebraska, and now they're competing with the world organizing body of cycling for the name Gravel Worlds. I'm like, who would have guessed that 10 years ago? And I think that got resolved, but it was kind of a funny moment in the history of gravel cycling. So
sure, yeah. Well, that is, yeah. I think it is super fascinating just to see the growth. And yeah, I mean, I get excited when I see some of the pros that whether they're changing direction in their focus or they retired, like I kind of like it. And if that can help the sport, I'm all for it. If we get to this point of more and more flashy races, and how far can we go? How many people can we shove in here, and how fast can we? Then, yeah, it feels a little not as gravel-ish as I'd like it. But yeah, we'll see. It's going to be interesting the next few years. You mentioned this film on YouTube, and just that is, I think I said it before, that's where I saw you first and heard of you first. Sometimes I'll have YouTube on in the background, and just it's like on a cue, like the next video comes up and the next video comes up, and yours popped up called The Good Line, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, a gravel video. And then I whatever my focus was changed to the TV. I'm like, oh, this is kind of interesting, and oh, Heck of the North, I've heard of Heck of the North. But then the direction of that film went somewhere I did not expect it to. First of all, it's beautifully made. Who'd you say made the film?
Yeah, it's a local creator up here named David Cowardin, and he's been making films now for years. And so his body of work now is, I was when he asked me to do the film, I kind of jumped at the chance, because his other work is really beautifully done too. And he's a great storyteller. And so I was honored that he thought that there was maybe a story in there. And so we took the time to do it. And it took a while, because then COVID hit and life happened for both of us. But it finally came together. And so he's a great local, up here, northern Minnesota, Duluth guy. And
so you said, I mean, he's a great storyteller. Did he know your story, or did he want to do a piece on the gravel race and the event and the community there, or does he know you personally?
Well, so, because
it's very personal. He gets very personal.
Yeah, and he's really sneaky that way. He's a really good interviewer, and a big section of the work we did was just me in his living room with the audio on, and he was asking me questions, and I was in a place where I felt to be really honest about the responses, and yeah, some heavy material for me. And I think the story grew, obviously, as I think anyone who writes or creates stuff realizes that the story sometimes changes midway. Like, all of a sudden your idea of where the end place was going to be all of a sudden took a totally different path, and so I don't know exactly what David had in his mind. He was pretty quiet about that. All I know is, he asked some pretty pointed questions about gravel cycling and how it shapes my brain and mental health in general, and then we got into relationship stuff, and I'm a mental health nurse and I work in the ER here. And I talk some really heavy things with people that don't know me, and I'm not afraid to discuss that stuff. But, it's always different when it's personal. And then, with stories too, it's like, I kind of joke that the world doesn't need another 40 or 50-year-old white guy talking about cycling, sorry, but
no, it's so true.
David did a good enough job that I'm like, okay, well, I'll give it a shot, and
Yeah.
I think from what I've heard back from people that it resonated with people that see it, and I just think that David did a good job of a really good job of putting it together, and maybe there's parts of that story again that hit people in a way that a good story does,
Yeah, and before, we've been kind of dancing around it a little bit, but the story kind of opens up. It introduces you. It introduces Heck of the North and your event, but then kind of starts talking about your struggle in your journey, your kind of mental health journey throughout the last few years, and and I thought I think things like that. Yeah, it's just another white guy talking about his problems or something. But I don't know. I think it's helpful for people. So like someone like me that can watch, hey, I'm into cycling. I'm into gravel cycling. Whoa, this kind of came out of left field. I wasn't expecting it, but now it has my attention and definitely resonates with me and with a lot of other people. I think it's important that honesty is important for everyone to hear. And to be honest with ourselves then in turn,
Yeah. No. And I mean, that self-deprecating when it talks about, who it's for, it doesn't matter who, I think it's stuff that, it's topics that probably a lot of people I know have dealt with in their life or are dealing with in their life when it just comes to like, kind of where am I at in my life, or what's my relationship like, that whatever that may be with, if you're, married or in some sort of partnership. Those heavier questions really, had this really cool intersection with cycling. And I think that is kind of a universal story, no matter where you're coming from, what race you are, what age you are. It's like, there's something about cycling to me that really allowed me to process some heavy things in my life. And I see that and I hear that from other people that do my events too. I say the Tour Divide was life-changing for me, and I don't say that lightly, so there was something about that process of spinning the wheels that many times and being that raw emotionally and physically that really was needed for me at that time.
Can you set that up for us a little bit, because you did it really well in the film, and I was going to ask you about that, about your experience at the Tour Divide. Can you set up where you were leading up to even traveling to the start of it?
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, the Tour Divide. So I did it in 2017. It had been going for a number of years before that, but it'd always been like this back and forth obsession that I've had for years, and finally got the opportunity to really put it together via support from family, frankly, like in-laws and everyone, and my wife and the rest of my family at the time. And so I just dedicated all this time, all this energy to putting that together. And it is, a ton of time to get that lined up. And, but, it hit at a time in the relationship with my wife that was, it's like, we needed, I think, a lot of work at that time. And it was, it was a crazy timing. In that part of my relationship. And so when I left, it was like, holy cow, where am I at? Where am I at with anything? I didn't know, frankly, the status of which way my marriage was going to go, where I was at with, this person that I loved. Um, and it took that 22 days. I mean, that was kind of the start of it, I should say, of being by myself and riding really, 120 miles a day on average, that I don't know how I finished it really with what was kind of going on in my brain. But at that same time, it was a very, I think cathartic might be the word, of just like kind of dealing with some really, really heavy stuff. And that process of the Tour Divide, which was an incredible experience and extremely difficult every day, to kind of wade through some of that really heavy stuff that we were going through at the time. And it wasn't just a relationship. It was, it maybe who I was at the time of like, what am I doing in life? And it was, I wouldn't say a midlife crisis, but it was kind of, there was some elements that were like, needs to be figured out,
Yeah.
And
I thank you for sharing that again. It struck me when you're telling me this, it strikes me that when you're preparing for something like the Tour Divide, your mental energy is usually taken up by the event itself. And you kind of want to go into something like that with a certain clarity and a certain,
right.
I mean, let's be honest. Like if you're not focused, you can get into some big trouble. And it's the same thing with any like big event or like long, you need to be focused. So as you're telling me this, like I could not imagine going into something that requires focus, but then being drawn elsewhere. But then I'm thinking, was that actually kind of a blessing to have that? And to have the time for yourself, and to go through, just have that time to kind of process. And then I'm sure when you look back at the Tour Divide now, it has so much more meaning to you than if you just went and accomplished it, because you accomplished multiple things on that trip and it just wasn't finishing.
Right. Well, that's I think a really good question, or insights, is that I think the space that I decided to take with the Tour Divide, and then at the same time, the space that we were apart during, my wife and I were, physically apart during that time, obviously. And I think I could have easily just like, I can't believe I didn't just stop after 2 days and be like, what is going on? Like, why am I still doing this? Something, I don't know why, but something made me keep going. And I don't have a great answer for that. I think that's really good, like how you can do things in the face of a lot of other stress coming at you from another direction, and maybe I was allowed to just, I blocked it out a little bit. But let me tell you, when you're riding like that, you've got, it's certainly not boring, but you've got a lot of time to think about stuff.
Sure.
And, it's like, and the tour for me was spent largely individual. Like I didn't ride with many people. And so there was time to really kind of just get to the bare basics of life. And that's the beauty of cycling. It's the beauty of bike packing, I think, of like, hey, your job is to get some sleep, get on your bike in the morning, eat, take care of your bodily functions, and then ride. It's ridiculous in its simplicity, kind of, even though it's complex in a micro level, but it's like, those are your main jobs. For me, I needed to get 100 miles every day somehow, but the idea of like the right time, I think it was somewhat, I'm glad it happened. And yeah, the Tour Divide now has a whole other context of just more than just finishing a big physical challenge. It was a big emotional challenge as well. And to do them kind of simultaneously, or whatever worked, it happened. And I was able to get through and come out, as we look back now, both of us benefited from that time away from each other, and also doing the things that we did of like, I kind of banged my head against a rock for 20 days, and we had time to think about where we were going, and I don't know if I was at a conference for 20 days, if it would have been the same. I think there was really something magic about riding, during that time period. And I think, okay, bringing it not, away from me, but like when people do 100-mile days, I think it's a smaller version. I've had that on 100-mile days where you're out there for 7, 8, 10 hours. And you're like, you think about life, and you think about, you go through ups and downs during the day, and peaks. 1 minute you're doing great, another 10 miles, you're feeling like hell. Then it switches around. And I like that mini analogy for gravel, is that it's hard, but it's not impossible. And I think it allows people to finish that day and be like, wow, that was, I thought about some stuff, or,
Sure.
maybe I didn't think about something for 10 hours, whatever it is they needed. That's what you can get from doing a long event.
I would hope that threshold moves from person to person.
Oh, for sure.
Because the benefit that I get from riding mentally is much like, most people do. And I would hope that that's accessible to everyone, whether or not they can bite off 100 miles or, be doing the Tour Divide or can just do a 20-mile ride. I think that
it's all relative.
Mm-hmm.
And I strongly believe in that. Everyone is really different. And I may have been, these people, I'm an outlier, I guess, of like, we take it for granted now, but it's still like, I look back, I'm like, wow, that was kind of impressive. Like what I did. and that certain people do, but then I talk to people that finished a marathon or a 26-mile gravel event, or even 5 miles on their bike. And the story is just as powerful. It's just different. And it's so relative to the person telling it. And
right.
That's where that beauty lies, in that you don't have to do the Tour Divide. That's where I was in my life at that time. You talk to, people that haven't been on their bike for 40 years and they finish 5 miles. And like, that's a big deal, and I never, ever say that doesn't, that's just as powerful. It's just different. It looks a little different,
Right.
and that's really where the cool stories are again. The movie, I guess I hope the movie brought some of that shared experience of both not only cycling, but also kind of life stressors together for some people. And I think I've gotten good responses back, and maybe I haven't gotten any negative responses, which is interesting. There's always some guy that writes back and you think about, and, one letter out of 100 is bad. And you think, you're the whole time
sure,
about
it ruins
that,
everything.
it ruins everything. But no, people have been really, really cool with that story. So I, again, push that back on David for putting it together. And if I help that story along, that's great. I'm glad to be part of it.
I think it's definitely something. I think we were talking about this on the phone a few days ago, but mental health in sport has just been something that's been way more, I guess, talked about in the last few months between the Olympics and tennis and all this stuff. So I definitely, anything that brings that out more has to be good. And it's interesting. I hesitate because I know you are a mental health professional, or I guess would you call yourself that, a mental health?
Yeah, I'm a registered nurse.
Yep.
Yeah, and I consider it a professional career now. But I talk with people that come into the ER who are suicidal or psychotic, or or extremely anxious, depressed, whatever mental health concern they have. And I help the physician or the PA make a decision whether or not they're going to go inpatient or not, what to do next. So, my day-to-day work is listening to like really amazing, crazy, sometimes extremely traumatic stories of, and trying to get people more comfortable with the idea of talking about their mental health. People will go to the hospital and like, hey, I've got a broken ankle. Let's go to the hospital. I've got pneumonia. They'll tell their family, hey, I've got pneumonia. I've got a broken arm, whatever it is. But as soon as you start talking about mental health in this country, it's like no one, and it's getting better. I mean, we are going the right direction, but It's like, you can talk about pneumonia, but you can't talk about the anxiety or the suicidal thoughts you may have had. That's like still taboo. And that really needs to change. And so I'm still kind of, sorting through that when it comes to, how much to share about. Well, I mean, there's no question to me that needs to change in the country. And when it comes to cycling, I know personally, that I've talked to other riders that are recovering addicts, and that's a really interesting transition between being addicted to a substance like heroin or alcohol or whatever, and then moving into the endurance world. You would be amazed at the number of addicts that switched from using to endurance racing. I mean, it's fascinating. And I also talked to the people that have, really done top 10 events for me, and they're maybe not suicidal, but they struggle with depression or anxiety, and cycling for them, I'm sure, is a therapeutic thing, most likely. And again, then people just don't know about it because no one talks about depression or anxiety, until it's too far gone. And so to have that discussion in the public of like, yeah, cycling is really good for my mental health because XYZ, I'm like, that's great. Just like you would talk about like, wow, physical therapy was really good for my sore back. There's no stigma to that. There should be no stigma to talking about, getting yourself back on a mentally healthy state via any exercise, whether it's cycling or something else, some more type of therapy. So,
yeah, so I guess my hesitation was, I know it's so nuanced that there can't be just a blanket, a fix. Like there's not one way to fix this. But then as I was thinking about that, then you went into this, well, we just need to talk about it more, and it needs to be brought to light, and it needs to be spoken about, and on, all these different ways. And so I agree with that. I mean, I think that's how we start. And then how, and that's the move in the right direction. No.
It has been interesting watching these really elite level athletes, like you mentioned, and particularly in tennis and other, in gymnastics, to like, holy mackerel, that's like a big deal. That's like, that's the elite of the elite saying, I'm not feeling it this time. I'm like, when do you see that? Was shocking to see,
Right.
And I know there's, without a doubt, there's cyclists and within gravel cycling and pro cyclists too. And that, it's just, that's why they ride, or that's part of what their process is for staying on top of their life, and I don't have an agenda when it comes to mental health and riding, or the events, but I certainly, when people write to me and share their experiences, I'm really open and with them and say, hey, I'm more than I'm really glad you told me that stuff. And, it's cool that they're open, that they can share it, because it's like, it's kind of a big deal for some people to talk about. And that's been a really odd, but fascinating and really rewarding part of directing the events is, listening to other stories of where people have been and what cycling does to their life, And I think gravel's just really cool that way. I don't remember people talking about, road racing that way,
Yeah.
I don't even know about mountain biking back in the, heyday of when mountain biking came out, when I saw it in the 80s and the 90s. I don't know. It was definitely, it was different. Gravel is, I still hope that we can keep that, again, that feel, that openness in gravel cycling of like, I think that's a great layer to gravel cycling, and I hope that sticks around.
That that kind of wraps our whole conversation kind of full circle back to gravel. Do you want to just quickly, I don't remember, did you give us the dates of your 3 events?
Yeah, no, I didn't. Everything is via the website heckofthenorth.com. That's all one word. And Le Grand du Nord is May 28th this year. It's Memorial Day Saturday. The Fox, our 2-day bikepacking event, is end of July. I think it's July 28th through the 30th. And then Heck of the North is October 1st this year.
Okay.
So just a hair later. So we're kind of spread throughout the season. And I hope, again, up in this region, we really look forward to, we're making a big push to, like I said, to welcome riders that may have never felt welcome to cycling, whatever community you're coming from, or what other age. So our cyclists 18 and younger ride free, as long as they've got a guardian or a parent with them. So we've seen a big increase in that, which is great. We're seeing local high school, like mountain bike teams, start hitting the gravel during the season. I'm seeing, we're seeing riders in their 70s and 80s getting out there. And that is awesome to me. Again, those are where the really great stories are. And we're just seeing, we do a 20% discount for people that refer new riders to cycling or to gravel cycling. So try to make it a little bit more accessible to them. And like, hey, here's 20% off, come join us. That's where it's at really with me. And we've gone further to kind of welcome other communities up north here that, maybe never felt welcomed in the cycling community. And that's a slow process, but I hope we get there. So that's where it's at. If we get some growth from that, that's great. Otherwise, I want new people out there riding, and I want our old veterans to be there too. I mean, I love seeing them. I see these people twice a year, and it's a highlight of my year for some, like, wow, this is great. I only see you a couple times, but I see them at the finish line, and that's why I still keep doing it.
That's great. Well, thank you, Jeremy, for your time and talking about your events, and then being able to, get in this whole conversation about mental health and talking about your own experience. Really appreciate it. I think the film is, and its honesty and what it communicates, it is helpful to a lot of people. And then again, I appreciate you kind of rehashing it and not reliving it, but
yeah.
But I appreciate you talking about it here too. And for people listening in Michigan, I like the idea of, you're just on the other side of Lake Superior, so you're not really much different than us, right?
No, we're not that far away. I mean, and like I said, man, when I look at the calendar now, I'm blown away with the number of events, in the country. And it makes me wish I could have the whole summer off to go tour and to go race different parts of the country, just through the gravel events. I think that would be an awesome way to see the country and to meet new people, and so that's a good thing. There's lots of good things going on in gravel cycling these days. So I'm happy to be part of that. And thanks for letting me talk a little bit more. And it's, I really enjoy talking about cycling, and hopefully we can see each other someday on the road.
Definitely. Thank you. The Dirty Chain Podcast is a Michigan Midpack Media production in partnership with KOM Cycling, the source for your bike accessories and necessities. Connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Dirty Chain Podcast. Email dirtychainpodcast@gmail.com. If you are enjoying the podcast, please leave us a rating and review on whatever platform you use to listen. Audio editing and original music by myself, Trevor Gibney. A huge thank you to Jeremy Kershaw for joining us on this episode, and thank you for listening to the Dirty Chain Podcast. And as always, keep your chain clean, but get your chain dirty. We will see you in the Midpack.